Souse us, therefore, in the powdering tub of thy mercy,
that we may be tripes fit for the heavenly table.
Welcome, Meatsmiths. You are listening to a Meatsmith harvest,
restoring husbandry to prosperity
by the traditions of our fathers.
This dialogue picks up where we left off in our last episode's conversation. You can find part 1 on our website, YouTube, or iTunes. If the content resonates with you, please consider supporting our team by going to patreon.com/Meatsmith and donating a small monthly pledge. This goes directly toward more free media headed your way. Thanks for staying tuned for part 2.
The similarities that we see between us and the animals, they're no less real.
Right.
They're there. But they're symbolic.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what's so cool, because they're more like the relationship. It's potency. And so I'll give an example of this. This is one that Deacon Florence gave in one of his homilies.
Okay.
But he was telling this story because sometimes we see in animals extraordinary acts that seem to go beyond their nature.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, technically, they don't go beyond their nature.
Yeah.
But they are analogous of a higher life form. We can see that analogy. And it's okay. We can think in terms of analogy. We don't have to be like totally one-to-one, Yeah. We don't have to be univocal or equivocal, where it's like nothing means anything. It's all a matter of interpretation. You're just saying it because you want to and you have a tummy ache and whatever.
Yeah.
Or univocal, where you say, no, we are the same thing as animals because we have the same. No, there's
some subtlety there.
There's a little more precision that could be brought to it. It's analogous.
Yeah.
There's analogy.
Well, we are animal too.
Yes, that's right.
We're the rational animal.
Yeah.
So, I'm sorry, I'm hijacking this, but in my example, I can look at a lamb, a sheep having a ewe, having a baby, and I can go, that animal is not freaking out right now.
Yes.
And she's delivering a baby. Then I can go, I guess I don't have to freak out right now either.
Yeah. You can know that you're doing a natural thing.
Right.
Right. Yeah. You have to be a human creature with a corrupted reason in order to think of pregnancy as an illness that needs to be treated as an illness, which is sort of what the whole medical complex around that is. We got to heal you of this pregnancy.
I know.
It's like, no, the lamb drops her lamb like in the grass.
Yeah.
Anyway, and she's content
and
to do it.
And even though that's instinct and I have to learn it by knowledge, by sensory, perception.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay that I'm learning it differently, and I'm actually learning how to be a good animal by my fellow creature, and I elevate it through my reason to adapt to the various situations I might be in that might require, I can't just drop my baby in the grass. Right.
You know that by reason.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so an example of this, there's so many examples.
The dog example.
There's the dog example. I also just remembered a really great actual sheep example.
Oh, okay.
But it's really gruesome. But man, it's incredible. And you can see why certain animals offer themselves. They lend themselves to the highest mystical contemplation. And our Lord does not hesitate to seize upon them for precisely that purpose, especially sheep. And the dog example is there's this trapper in Alaska, and he lives with dogs. And trappers live a very solitary existence. They wander from little cabin to little cabin, trapping small animals for their fur. Almost totally solitude. I mean, they're like serious loner pioneers. And so they have companions that are many times canine. So they have dogs. And one day this trapper is out doing something, but he's got his dogs with him, and he encounters a grizzly bear.
Oh, and he's trained the dog too.
He's been training the dogs. Yeah. And so, which is a whole great thing. There's some sort of cooperation between the interior principle of the dog's intellects and the exterior principle of the man's training.
Right.
And what the man is doing is bringing reason to bear on the instinct of the dog.
Okay. Wow.
That's what all domestication is.
That's a really good statement, what you just said. The hierarchy, the man's reason is helping the dog fulfill its instinctual nature.
Its instinctual nature is to be loyal to the pack.
Yeah.
And to occupy a place in that pack hegemony very strictly. And they never disobey. Like dogs, pigs, they keep the hierarchical order of the pack because that's their instinct. That's what they do. That's what's ingrained in them. They have all these instincts, but when the man brings his reason to bear on the dog, he's cooperating with that instinct and building upon it.
Right.
So that sometimes the dog can be so elevated to not fulfill its instinct.
Yeah.
Which is amazing. And I think that's what domestication is. It's not a degradation of the wild dog that's roaming around, free as a bird,
right,
eating garbage and dying miserably. That's not actually the fulfillment of the dog. It's domestication. Because when you domesticate the dog and you bring your reason to bear on it, sometimes it will apparently sure looks like it transcends its nature.
Right.
At the very least, it will, for a higher end, it will defy its most basic instinct.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
It can actually order ends. That's a very human act to order ends, as primary or secondary end. And in this case, a bear came out, a grizzly bear, only like 800 times bigger than the dog. And he started charging the man. And the man was able to get 2 shots off into the body of the bear, which of course does absolutely nothing. Keeps coming. And one dog breaks free. I think they were even sheltered. They were even contained.
Wow.
Breaks free and leaps at the bear's face.
Wow.
Leaps. And it is just, the bear is mid-charge. So this is all seconds, happening in seconds. And it is just enough to turn the bear's head, right? Because the dog is going at his face hard. And it kind of trips the bear and he stumbles, which gives the man just a few more seconds to be able to really run up and get a good sight target and drill the bear in the head with a couple of rounds. And that kills the bear.
Okay.
So what did the dog do? That is the question.
Yeah.
The dog saved the man's life.
Right.
But how much did he know?
Yeah.
This is the crazy thing, because the dog, after this experience, was mortally wounded.
Right.
The dog, with any canine sense that he might have had, in his very admirable doggish way, knew he can't beat a bear. That's why all the other dogs were wisely not there.
Well, wasn't it part of the training too, is that the man kind of trained the dogs to not, like, he kind of broke a rule, didn't he? The dog, they were trained, he trained the dogs to not attack bears. Like, as a matter of course.
To not pick a fight?
Yeah.
I don't remember that part of the homily.
To me, it was like the dog was actually going against its nature. Maybe.
Well, it's just the nature of self-preservation.
Okay.
Yeah, dogs don't pick fights alone with bears. Right. Maybe in a pack, they can harass a bear. But alone. Yeah. That's what was unique about this. Yeah. So he broke free from the companions. Yeah. And the other dogs were like, no, not doing that. Yeah. And he got mortally wounded in the process, which what else is going to happen? So the dog died. But we don't look at that and say, oh, see, the dog had supernatural charity.
Yeah.
Because he gave his life for his neighbor.
Yeah.
It's like, no, that's imprecise, but also when you do that, you're missing out on what did actually happen.
Yeah.
Which is this momentary miracle that we just live in, especially if you're on a farm, of domestication.
Mm-hmm.
The dog's nature was elevated. It
Mm-hmm.
defied its the most elemental thing that even some plants have,
Mm-hmm.
right? A much lower life form of self-preservation. And
almost using an act of reason.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, and we use reason all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So in the same way that a dog might actually break through the rules of his own instinct.
Yeah.
And do something that was rational.
Yeah.
We also can break through the rules of our reason if we are already ordered towards reasonable behavior.
Yeah.
And we can be elevated too into a transcendent realm too. But that's a whole nother story.
Yeah.
But you're saying it's an analogy.
That's an analogy
we can use to learn. That's actually one of the ways Thomas says that we learn about God to begin with is through analogy.
Yeah.
Analogy is really, really key to how we learn.
Yeah. And you will see this analogy of self-sacrifice, which is the highest thing that a human can attain to.
Right.
It's the model of the divine. That's what our Lord showed us, who God is. Animals have a remarkable ability to do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
yeah, we all have these stories.
It's incredible.
Of birds, rescuing their owners, eagles, or
There was this ewe on Vashon once that I slaughtered, but she fought off bald eagles. Oh, so she lambed. She was being attacked by immediately lambing. So she gave birth to twins. And immediately the eagle was there.
Yeah.
Like the twins are barely staggering around and starting to nurse. And then this bald eagle comes down, and bald eagles only go after they're scavengers. They're not really hunters. I mean, yes, they might hunt fish, but man, they're like crows. If they can just pick on a dead carcass, they'll do that every time. And, newly born lambs, that's kind of what they look like. So I think that's the low bar that motivated this eagle to go after the lambs. So the ewe defended the lambs because of her maternal instinct, which is analogous to the heights of self-sacrifice that is possible to attain on the terrestrial plane. And this eagle, she was attacking it, of course, with her head, right? Because that's how sheep do. So she was trying to ram it.
Right.
And she did. And she rammed it so successfully that she saved her lambs. The eagle gave up, which is kind of incredible.
Yeah.
But in the process, it totally blinded her.
Wow.
So with its talons, it just shredded her face.
Wow.
She was blind in both eyes. He pulled out her eyes and just totally wounded her face.
Wow.
And nonetheless, so now she's blind.
Yeah.
Okay. She cleans her lambs. She just goes right back to work. Cleans her lambs. They nurse her. But she's not very good at eating. Yeah. And she can't follow the movements of the other sheep because she's blind.
Yeah.
So she needs to be culled from the herd.
Yeah.
And that's why I was called in.
Oh, okay.
And
man.
And so according to the nature of the sheep, it usually doesn't make sense to separate sheep from the herd for any reason. They hate it.
Right.
It's no kindness to them. So what I do, because that's contrary to their nature. So what I do is I have to kill this lamb, not only with the flock, this ewe, not only with the flock, but with her little lammies.
Wow.
And it was just this incredible icon of self-sacrifice, because I killed this sheep, just with the knife, as we do, laid her down. It's very peaceful, very quiet. And the lambs are right there because they're always close to mom. And I kid you not, they went up. They kind of smelled her for a second. They actually nudged at her udder and got like a last sip of milk.
Wow.
But she was dead.
Yeah.
And then they just pranced off to the herd. Just like, their tails flying in the wind. Totally they weren't fleeing. They weren't afraid.
Yeah.
Just like, and it's like, oh, those heartless little freaks. But no, actually, when you think about it, she won. She beat the eagle. Those were happy lambs.
Yeah.
That was her final cause.
Yeah.
Was to create those lambs. And she did. And for them to go away and join the herd.
That's right.
Boom.
Yeah, that would have been unsuccessful.
Mission accomplished.
Yeah.
She did it.
Had they been moping around and
yes,
starving themselves.
right.
Or,
yes. And not decided not to thrive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would have been an empty sacrifice.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. But they were super happy. It was kind of funny.
Yeah.
They were just like doing their stotting thing where they hit all 4 feet on the ground at once.
Yeah.
It's called stotting.
Uh-huh.
And they bound and their tails fly up and
I know.
just went back to the other sheep. Because I think they knew instinctively she's dead. They knew that. Mm-hmm. But we are alive.
Yeah.
And we're happy about that.
Yeah.
So
wow.
But so the at least in the animal kingdom,
mm-hmm.
as it were,
mm-hmm.
we have the analogies, and I think that there is the latent potency
mm-hmm.
for animals to transcend their own instincts
mm-hmm.
sometimes.
Yeah.
And that's amazing.
Yeah.
And I think that is that's what happens when we domesticate them. It's the active force. This is why your dog looks at you like in the eyeballs. And has all of these hyper complex emotional demands on you. It's because we domesticated them and taught them words. Yeah. And so they're participating a little bit in the realm of reason.
Yeah.
Insofar as they are able. And if you stand back and you look at the whole created order, it's ordered towards going to the next order of being.
Yeah.
It's ordered towards the mountaintop.
Yeah.
It's to elevation. And if we take the wild nature, and it's the same with the seed. We take the latent potency in the seed, and then we have to nourish it. We have to work with the interior principle of the land and the interior principle of growth in the seed. And then as an exterior principle to those things, we can breed them and prune them, and we can hybridize them, and we can create all of our cultivars, all of our cultivated plants. And in so doing, we create what appear to be new things, still, as long as you're following, the order of creation, which I would say genetic modification runs contrary to, but you're following the order of every seed bearing plant reproducing according to its kind.
Right.
You can enhance it and elevate it. And what you're doing is actually participating as a creator in creation to a limited degree. And that act is the act of elevating a thing apparently beyond, but still using the rules of its own nature to bring it higher up on the scale of being.
Yeah, it's written into natural law to participate. In fact, it is, I was just reading about this. The natural law is the rational creature's participation in the eternal law. So we converge on, what is the term that you use? We can verge on the transcendent. We harmonize, we quiver with the spheres.
Yeah. We quiver in harmony with the music of the spheres.
That's right.
On the edge.
When we just fulfill our natural things, like we've created children that have souls that will echo into eternity.
Right.
So this is not just a material thing we're messing with, but yet it's also just a very natural act.
Yeah.
And something you said reminded me of that. But it's natural law. So like farming, making delicious meals, it is just natural, but it's not just natural. It is setting a table for activities like conversation, like what we're having now, that build up, that elevate us, that kind of grow our reason that can then participate with the divine.
Yeah. It's I think the philosophical term that Dr. Malash would use is the passive potency.
Okay.
Or like latent, but I think it means that for a thing like for the Bos aurochs, the wild European bovine, that we erroneously say is extinct.
Okay.
It's not extinct. It's called the Jersey cow and the Guernsey and the Holstein, and every European domesticated breed of bovine comes from the European wild bovine,
right?
Which is not extinct, but indeed thriving very well. It's managed to move into human habitations, which are very commodious, and be fed so well and bred with such care that it produces more milk than its calves need. And now it's the nursemaid of human civilization. And we can all preserve milk, the most nutritious food on the planet produced by any creature. And we can preserve it in the form of cheese, the subtlety of flavor of which is still a frontier being explored with great relish by people with intellect. But all of that to say that I can't remember what I was saying, actually.
Well, you were helping me with my train of thought, which is, we've elevated through not genetic modification, but through selective breeding.
Oh, yes, right.
We've elevated a species beyond what it could have done itself.
Yes, right. So it has this passive potency, the Bos aurochs.
Right.
Some enterprising, bold human managed to snag a calf one day. I don't know. Or I don't know how they, maybe it was angelically infused knowledge or something to start domesticating the noble bovine. And how they did that story would be amazing. But it's not that wild cow has a humongous udder that's easy to milk, because it didn't at the beginning.
Wow.
That had to be conferred upon it by reason, by the use of reason over successive generations, which is a distinctive trait of the use of reason, by the way, is to string information together over time.
Yeah.
That's not a thing that sensibility can do.
You need tradition for that.
It doesn't constitute an experience with the individual occurrences in time. That's a feature of reason. And so we did that, and it's because the bovine, the Bos aurochs, it's just because, again, not it had the udder, or someone accidentally bumped into a Bos aurochs and tripped and fell and got some milk and it's like, ooh, this is good. It's not that. It's because someone using reason made an analogy. It's like, calf drinking milk. And that calf is only drinking milk and thriving.
Yeah.
I bet that would taste pretty good.
Or they slaughtered a veal calf.
Yes, just to make cheese.
Took out the cheese stomach and then was like, that smells kind of good.
There's cheese in the rennet stomach.
Right.
What if we put some of the rennet stomach in a vat of the mother's milk? Would it all become this? Yes.
Yeah.
It's called cheese.
That instinct is not going to arrive at that.
No. That's what reason do.
Yeah.
That's how reason acts upon the basic elementary requirement that we feed ourselves. We know we need to feed ourselves. And so instead of instinctually putting our head down and munching the grass, we have to use reason to acquire our food. And then voila, you have all of the culinary arts.
Yeah.
And the bovine, that wild bovine, it did not lend itself to it in that sense. It needed reason to act upon it. The thing that it brought was the passive potency. It was the kind of thing that could be milked, such that it didn't have to become another thing in order to be milked. Like if you wanted, something that does not have the passive potency to make cheese is, to steal an example from Dr. Malash, is a frog. Not going to happen. So it does not have the passive potency to be milked and to make cheese. It has to become another thing. But that's all it really brings to the table, is this latent potency that can, through reason, become act, can become cheese.
And I would say too that you've already mentioned this, but when you look at something like milk, okay, milk is the thing that can nourish us, and reason, guided by grace, also is not satisfied with merely survival. And okay, well, if we just drink a bunch of milk, we'll stay alive. It's if I take that milk, I can make something even more elevated and developed and complex and beautiful and with a lot of variety, and I can make cheese. And there you have the culinary arts. And it becomes more, the passive potency of milk is to become cheese. And it just keeps going when you have that reason guiding you.
And I think you can look at all of creation, and you could have these very general understanding of things as having, living things have three basic powers of growth, reproduction, and nourishment. All living things can do those three things, all the way down to plant life. They have the power of growth. They can grow, they can reproduce themselves after their kind, and they can nourish themselves. And then as you ascend to the different levels of being, you get animals that will add to those powers locomotion, the ability to move around, and appetites, a kind of different, they choose what to eat, right? And when, as they get more complex. And then you could take each of those powers, growth, nourishment, and reproduction, and then add reason. And hopefully the most distinguishing feature of the way that humans grow, reproduce, and nourish themselves. I said that backwards. That's what I meant to say. Those should be the most distinguishing features of human life, is that we grow, reproduce, and nourish ourselves different wise from the animals, because we bring reason, we bring the power of reason. We have to do all of those things by reason, because, like Thomas says, we lack the natural, immediate powers of, we're not walking around with our shelter on our back. We have pink, vulnerable skin that needs a house. And so the way that we supply that basic elementary bodily needs so that we can grow successfully as opposed to shrink and die, is by applying our reason. And now we have carpentry and masonry and timber framing. That's what reason do. So it's natural. And it's not just advanced like anthill building. I'm sorry, no. It doesn't work. It's way beyond that. Because we imbue our structures with symmetry as if where we should. If you look at the times when people were aware of the fact that they had immortal souls, the architecture will indicate that proportionately. It looks like maybe something immortal would live here or do something in this structure. It's proper to an immortal being. And great proof of that is that we have these structures that do not serve at all our need for nourishment, growth, or reproduction.
Right.
Therefore, going beyond. Therefore, the supernatural.
Yeah, right.
And that's what our beautiful, at least medieval churches are.
Yeah.
Clearly ordered towards the next level of being, even beyond the rational, which is the realm of grace.
Yeah, right. What about the four ends of labor?
Yeah.
Because this all requires our effort to, breed animals, to house our children, to feed ourselves, not just adequately, but delightfully, and Thomas, like I said before, St. Thomas Aquinas, is concerned with how we do these things.
Yeah.
He's not an academic. He is a saint. And so he wants humans to be fully human.
Mm-hmm.
And he talks about things as mundane as manual labor.
Yeah.
Which the farmer, the homesteader, is very much familiar with.
Yes.
Can you go into that?
Yeah, it's so good. This is the way that Father so-and-so goes into it in this great book, The Importance of the Rural Life According to the Philosophy of St. Thomas Aquinas, a study in economic philosophy by Father George Speltz. And he says that there's manual labor, working with hands, manual, and it's easy to think, what would be the primary form? What's the primary act of manual labor? And without hesitation, St. Thomas says that it's very clear. It's not like, it's not making, tend to think of, a watchmaker sitting at a desk or something, or someone carving wood. The primary form of production that's the highest form of manual labor. Mm-hmm. And that is agriculture. Mm-hmm. So the preeminent act of manual labor is agriculture, because it is the highest form of production, because it produces the most elemental good. Mm-hmm. That's what makes it the highest, is that it supplies the lowest.
Okay.
It's really beautiful to think about.
Which is food.
Yes. Yeah. Agriculture. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Pater meus agricola est. Our Lord actually says that. My father is a farmer. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, no, distraction. Okay. So then there's 4 ends that St. Thomas assigns to manual labor. And this is great. And this is what, this is why agriculture, that specific form of manual labor, merits such a high place, because it achieves these ends so well, so preeminently. Mm-hmm. So it's directed first, manual labor, not agriculture. Okay, here, just manual labor itself. Okay. What is the primary end of all manual labor?
Right. So blacksmithing,
yes,
leather making,
yeah,
all of it.
It is food production, to obtain food.
Yeah.
That's the primary end, which immediately gives you a hierarchy of ends of all the manual trades. It's brilliant. Mm-hmm. All of the trades serve food production.
Yeah.
The blacksmith, the butcher, my trade of butchery and slaughter, the carpenter, they serve agriculture.
Yeah.
Agriculture is the principal manual labor, the production of food. Mm-hmm. The farmer he's the one for whom all of these secondary trades exist. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. He needs barns. Mm-hmm. Yeah. He does the most elemental thing. And so we can supply him with those things that help him do that. Mm-hmm. Slaughter his animals, build his houses and his barns, because he needs to grow food. Fight his wars, provide for his defense. Yeah. That's what the Lord and his manor is there for.
Clothe his children.
Educate them. Yeah. The cordwainers need to make shoes for him.
Yeah.
I mean, these are secondary trades that serve the primary principle of manual labor, which is to obtain food. Mm-hmm.
The poor's head in hand bear I, bedecked with bays and rosemary.
How many people do you know who are building their home culture around seasonal harvest and feasting?
or that are hunting as you are for self-sufficiency and back to the land values, or that share your artist's passion for human-scale meatcraft. At farmsteadmeatsmith.com, we've created a community of hundreds of omnivores from around the world with these shared goals, and 2 major places for them to learn from and inspire one another. First, we have our semi-annual hands-on educational event, The Family Pig, here at our Heartland homestead in Oklahoma. Come meet Brandon, get your elbows greasy, and over the course of 3 days, kill, cut, cure, and cook 2 pigs completely. You'll rub those greasy elbows with other meatsmiths from around the country, sharing meals and conversations to inspire you for years to come. Secondly, for more remote learning, over at farmsteadmeatsmith.com, we host a purely digital membership program with an archive of film and textual resources 5 years deep now. And both our on-site classes and online program include access to our most unique and rewarding private community Facebook page, Meatsmith Table, which is the only international network by and for homesteaders harvesting animals on a domestic scale using traditional and regional methods. We've been told that our classes are life-changing and the membership program unparalleled in quality and quantity. To get a taste of our education, search farmsteadmeatsmith.com and our YouTube channel for our free films, conversations, and downloads. Explore how we and other meatsmiths across the globe may best come alongside you and support you in building your home around the harvest. Please head to farmsteadmeatsmith.com today.
And I think you could probably generalize that into like, why does the blacksmith work with steel and metal for money so that he could attain food?
Right.
I mean, that's kind of the primary manual labor.
Well, he shods the horses that the farmer uses.
Yeah.
You know, he's building the rakes and the shovels, all of the tools that the farmer needs.
Right.
The farmer's not going to do that.
That's the purpose of manual labor. Okay, so the second end of manual labor, of which agriculture is a prime example, is to remove idleness.
Okay.
To remove idleness.
This is like getting out of the realm of the material only.
Yeah.
And into the realm of virtue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you want to deprive the devil of his playground.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And the best way to do that is manual labor, or one of the best ways. Yeah. And when you have an entire culture whose goal is to remove the obligation of manual labor or to outsource it to slaves in another country so that we can be comfortable, I think you get full free reign of the devil pretty quickly.
Yeah. Well, even like, okay, it's a very, very low bar, but even normal American parents, they tell their kids, you need to go play sports because it's manual labor and it will keep you busy so you don't get in trouble.
Right. Which is true.
It is. Yeah. I mean, if the kids don't have land to go, work on, which our boys are lucky to have. Well, and even then we don't give them too much, but we could give them more. But you need to give your kids something, lift weights, run ladders, do something to work.
Yeah, I think that's like common knowledge. Everyone believes that manual labor is an antidote to idleness. Yeah. And that it is a good.
That we have still retained that, I think. Yeah. As conventional wisdom.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's because we're vicious. And if given the opportunity by the absence of an obligation to do a thing, we're just going to do the wrong thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just give us a few minutes.
Yeah.
And, that's why I think that, manual labor is particularly prescribed by divine providence as penance for the fall. Because no longer are Adam and Eve whole and in the garden and totally impassable to, or I should say, they're not totally, unfortunately, as the third chapter of Genesis proves, but that they did not have any interior temptations to sin. And so idleness was not a problem.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah.
They could not be drawn away by an interior principle to something not good, to a vice.
Yeah.
It had to come from outside.
Yeah.
And so now that we do have that interior principle of, well, I'm just going to self-love myself into a blob of indulgence here, given the idleness, because of concupiscence, which is the next point. You have to obtain your primary good, food, by the sweat of your brow, through thorn and thistle.
Yeah.
Go to work.
Yeah.
And there is, I think, a mercy in that prescription of labor. The weeds are mercy, because it's better for you to pull them than to have too much time on your hands. And until grace comes in and restores, right?
Yeah. Right.
That original virtue. And then that's what we do in monasteries, where we contemplate, but they also work. Yeah. You know, so you're never like, you're never fully delivered from the manual labor.
The wandering eye.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I should correct myself. I think it still depends on what circles you run in, because I'm starting to see some circles where the temptation for a parent is, well, it's good for kids to have a little boredom. Yeah. You know, because the thought is then they could be creative. But I think that's, at least depending on the kid and depending on how long of a chance you give them, it's kind of high hopes that they will actually be fruitful with their spare time. Yeah. They might, but don't give them too much boredom. Yeah. You know, or just watch what they do with their boredom.
And I think what most people think too, especially in our generation, like I know I've said that before. It's good for them to be bored. Right. I think what we really mean is it's good for them not to have a screen.
Sure.
Because that's like...
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
To be staring into the chaos without that like superlative gratification of the screen. Which means you're going to have to be satisfied with lesser stimulants, like, you know, building a wood oven or know, a clay oven or something, which, but you're right. And I think it's in the, I think it's in the competition too for children, especially the tension between the fulfillment of their duties, which keeps them busy, chores, homeschool. It's in the tension between doing those and you rightly using their free time or board time, so-called. It's in the tension. So I think they need that tension.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to make sure, I think we said this before, but in the absence of giving them structure, because I give them plenty of structure, but then I do have to pull back and give them that free time. I make sure that there's banjos hanging on the walls and there's books everywhere littered about, you know, they can practically not walk anywhere without banging into a book, you know, that their room has plenty of stimulant things. You know, I'm constantly buying them little things to build or, you know,
pneumatic engineering stuff.
Yeah. So it's a balance. But like, you know, for a while there, when our kids were really little, I dabbled with the whole unschooling philosophy. And I didn't do it perfectly. I know there's probably a case to be made for it. But I think it leaned too much on this whole idea that given enough space, people will arrive at a higher level of complexity, and like the law of entropy just doesn't bear that out. So.
Yes, right. That's a good point, because what our children are, I feel like what some, okay, maybe not everybody, but what some of that unschooling mentality is based on is the premise that your children are innocent and virtuous.
Yes, right.
Just when they're born. Yeah. And they are only one of those things when they're born. They're not virtuous, actually. No. And they need they need to be taught that through repetition and through self-sacrifice.
Yeah. And falling hard.
Yeah.
And
self-denial.
How are we going to build this virtue? You know? Yeah. All that to say, that second point, that manual labor removes idleness.
Yeah.
Is really important.
Yeah. What else does it do?
Okay.
The third end of manual labor. Can we keep going?
Yeah.
Okay. The third end of manual labor is to curb concupiscence.
Okay.
So what is concupiscence?
Yeah. Do tell.
Oh, okay. Concupiscence. So a human being is constituted by having a body and a soul. And the powers of the soul that we possess are intellect and will. And then the powers that we have in our body are growth, nutrition, reproduction. And then we also have appetites in our body. And they are the things that incline us towards bodily goods. So, food, marriage. These are appetites or desires, passions, rest. Yeah. Even the desire to know things.
Curiosity.
Yeah. These are appetites that we have. And in a human that is living the good life and living virtuously, all of these powers of our appetites are ordered by reason. So we desire, our appetite to eat never goes into excess and we eat too much, or we eat too little and we malnourish ourselves. The defect and the excess of every virtue are contrary to reason. So they can be violations of, natural law or divine law. They can be sins, but they're also just not rational. They violate a principle of reason. It's contrary to reason. So that's why I like the definition of morality. It's just practical reasoning. It's not like the morality is just an arbitrary imposition of some culture upon an otherwise free and innocent material substrate of human plasma. No, it's actually like laws of the universe, and they work.
Yeah.
So like drinking too much alcohol, for example, in excess hurts. That's morality. And it's inscribed in the natural consequences of it. So anyway, when our appetites, which in themselves are indifferent, but because of the fall, our reason suddenly becomes subjugated to our appetites.
Yeah.
So now we might actually use this incredibly powerful intellectual weapon of our reason to acquire way too much cocaine. And I would say there's not even a moderate amount of cocaine that is okay to obtain. But
that's how out of sorts our reason can take us.
Yeah.
It really gets to be like wacko.
Now it's serving this appetite.
Yeah.
It's not serving the truth that is in our intellect. So that's what concupiscence is. It's a rebellion of the appetites against right reason.
Well, and it kind of starts out, you've said concupiscence is the desire or the appetite for goods.
Yes, that's right.
It's not that concupiscence is bad.
No.
It's that we have an inordinate desire for an excess of all these things.
Yeah.
Or like if I'm not married, I need to curb that appetite to create children.
Yes.
Full stop.
Yeah.
So, like it depends on your state in life too.
Yeah.
How much you can play with these appetites.
Yeah.
Some people just shouldn't eat certain foods or drink certain drinks. They just can't exercise that appetite.
Yeah, which might mean they don't have the virtue of eating well.
Right.
Or they don't have the virtue of imbibing alcohol. That's a virtue that they lack. Even if what they might have, though, is the virtue of abstinence from alcohol completely.
Right. Yeah.
Because the virtue is in it's in the mean.
Right. Excess, defect on either end.
Yeah.
Right.
And they're contrary to reason. So it was proportionate to the fall that when we put above an explicit command of God, a movement of the appetite, curiosity. And again, it was fittingly enough a food item. But in order to fulfill an appetite, we sinned against reason. We went against reason. And so since then, we have inherited that disorder, literally. Reason is not ordering the appetites, but the appetites are making a slave of reason.
Yeah.
And so the life of virtue inevitably involves pain, depriving the appetites of the excess that they want. So unless, if you're not experiencing pain in some way, probably not having any virtue.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be painful to reorder.
Yes.
And the cool thing about virtue is that it gets easier the longer you do it.
That's right.
Until it becomes delightful.
Exactly.
So you're restoring the original order. But that's concupiscence. And I think all of those things we just mentioned are, at the very least, potential in the act of agriculture.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so we have the four ends of manual labor are produce food, remove idleness, to curb concupiscence, which I would say those two they're kind of like integrated.
Yeah.
They overlap. There's places where they overlap.
Yeah.
Like for instance, one of these appetites I mentioned is rest.
Yeah.
Like you have to rest. The body needs rest. But that can become inordinate, especially if you're a certain temperament. And so that needs to be regulated by law, or by natural law, or the laws that a family has on its children. Like we need to...
By reason.
Right.
Yeah.
By reason, yeah.
And the cool thing about agriculture is that I think what St. Thomas is saying is that it has a built-in limitation on concupiscence.
Yes.
And that is so true.
Yeah.
And just like all virtue, it's a sweet pill. I don't know. It's not a bitter pill. Like the form that natural limitation and that on concupiscence that is present in agriculture is you have too much bacon.
Yeah.
And that literally is what that means is you're not eating anything else for a little while. It's both. It's on both ends. It's on what you are with the limitation of your production. Well, you simply can't produce olive oil. So you're not going to have a lot of olive oil. Or you can't produce things out of season. You will not be eating strawberries in December. So there's a natural limit there. But also it's the natural excesses, because manual labor is so extraordinarily productive. And we always say this, that you will find that the more challenging thing is not how do I produce enough food? It's how on earth do I deal with the immense quantity that I have produced before it spoils. It's too much. That's how productive manual labor guided by reason is, especially food growing, because it's very easy to grow 8,000 pounds of courgettes. No problem. You can grow summer squash by the truckload. Now you have too much. So, and to deal with that excess requires a limit on your concupiscence. I think that we live in an extraordinary time right now that we have no natural limits on our concupiscence. Through technology and commerce, we can effectively gratify every concupiscible appetite, every desire for excess. And so I think in our modern era, some of these limits to agriculture that were natural before the modern era are artificial in ours.
Yeah.
We actually have to put them up artificially as a matter of conjuring a conviction amidst a sea of indulgence.
Yeah, right.
And you actually have to say, I'm not going to do the easy thing and drive 10 minutes to the grocery store and buy meat. No, I'm going to raise a cow for 2 years. And I'm only going to eat beef as long as his carcass lasts. And we start the next cow.
Yeah. Or we brine some of it. Like that's where preservation comes in. We've elevated through reason. You know, when we have a surplus of milk, you know, that's another reason why cheese was invented. To help things last into the future, because we have reasons, so we know what the future means.
Yeah.
And there's going to be scarcity. So we have to, you know, process things the way animals don't.
Yes.
And knowing that I still need to eat in the future and I don't need to eat too much right now.
Yeah.
I'm going to make this stretch.
That's right. That's another power that many animals have that we lack is we don't hibernate. So they don't have to think about the winter. They just have to eat a bunch.
They do gorge.
They gorge. Yeah. And then go to sleep.
Yeah.
Go to sleep. And we're just like we lack teeth and all these other direct means of satisfying our bodily needs, we also lack hibernation. So we have to make prosciutto.
Yeah.
So the cause of making prosciutto is our lack of ability to hibernate.
Yeah. Right. That's right.
We don't have that ability.
Yeah.
So that's why I say it's a sweet pill, because prosciutto's good.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, actually, you can have strawberries in December. It's called jam, or you know, like we've canned it. We canned them, so we turned it into not a lesser, like, oh, I gotta hold our nose and save the strawberries. Like, no, we actually get to elevate the strawberries,
cultivate it,
and we can make it really delicious and have strawberry jam in December, or prosciutto in December.
Yeah, by use of our reason.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that is, that does constitute the good life. According to Aristotle, the good life is two things, or this is St. Thomas actually, but Aristotle obviously thinks this too. Aristotle's a little more stoic than St. Thomas.
I think you're right.
Yeah. So, but St. Thomas, so for Aristotle, it's to live virtuously.
Right.
That's the good life.
Okay.
To live virtuously. And it was more the Stoic idea that that's it, because that's a good of the soul. And yes, they believed in the soul because they weren't dumb. And that's what you needed. So body, who cares? Right? You know, as long as you've got the goods of soul, as long as you have fortitude, you can go ahead and starve to death because you have fortitude. Okay.
It only gets you so far.
But St. Thomas is like, no. Yeah. Actually. Yeah. The primary constituent of the good life is to live virtuously. But the instrumental ability, the instrument to do that, the instrumental cause of living virtuously is a sufficiency of bodily goods.
Oh, right. For
St. Thomas.
Okay.
A sufficiency.
Okay. Yeah. Yes.
Sufficiency of bodily goods. Not a deficit or an excess, but a sufficiency of bodily goods is necessary to act virtuously, to live virtuously.
So he's taking Aristotle's version and kind of clarifying it.
He's clarifying it and saying, we are rational animals. We have bodies. You cannot have a being that is a body and soul and say the goods of the body don't matter.
That's right.
No, that's contrary to the nature of what we are.
Yeah. Okay. So this opens up a can of worms for me. I don't know how much to go down this rabbit trail, because it's very enticing as Christians to be Aristotelian and not Thomistic. To think, if only I were more spiritual and virtuous, I don't really need to tend to the bodily needs of my family.
Or they're less important.
They're less important.
Which they are. But that is not a pretext for neglect.
Well, not this. Yeah, they still need that sufficiency.
Yes, right.
You can't just let your kids run around in the mud thinking you're homesteading. And
they will do that on their own too, you know.
Yeah. I mean, and they will, and there's actually good in like natural immunities built up. Like I get it. Yeah. But like at some point, they're going to have to learn how to spell. If you don't want them to live in poverty, and because poverty, like real poverty, doesn't allow you to build up the virtues. Like it doesn't allow you. So it's like this cycle. Yeah. It's not that we're trying to like be rich and wealthy. It's just that you do have to cultivate civilization in your children so that they can learn to read de reino. Right. Because they're going to go out in the world and live in a sea of toxic heresy. Yeah. And they're going to get confused. And so you need to build up, like, you need to make sure they're clothed well, that their hands and their face are clean, and that they, and it's just that there's this like pernicious lie that I think some Christian, especially homesteading types, and I get it, like I've been really careful, and I've fallen into the temptation of let's just all like live in the mud. Not really, but like
because poverty is good in itself.
Yes.
Which I think is actually false.
Right. Happy are the poor. Like sorry. Hi, Johnny. He's out there telling us that we got to go to mass soon. So
he smelled mass, right?
He did?
That's
good. Okay, John.
Which is easy. He knows how to smell mass.
Yeah.
It's 11:30. He's kind of right about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're opening up a can of worms, but
I know we should. If we could start the cooking up this can of worms in the next podcast, we could start with the virtue of poverty as opposed to the bare naked fact of a deficiency of material necessities. Because the communists have taught us to think, oh, poverty in and of itself, being deprived of material goods, that's good because that means other people have more. Yeah. And I'm all for the community. That is super wrong. Yeah. That's a lie. The virtue of poverty is in the will. Yeah. It's not in your exterior circumstances, like all virtues. It is the love of poverty. Yeah. And that is a different thing and precludes complaint and other things.
Yes, that's right.
So
yeah. Well, and I think also we look at, especially parents that are rightly ordered, they mean well, and they're striving for holiness, and it's almost like this, the lie always has a little bit of truth in it. And so you look at religious people and, well, they've taken a vow of poverty. Why shouldn't I take a vow of poverty? And it's good that my kids are living in squalor and we're reading the Bible and we're going to mass 7 times a week. But my kids aren't like, they don't know their right from their left, you know, and that's not going to create virtue. Grace has to build on nature. Yeah. And you are still living in the world. You're a married person. You have responsibilities to make sure your wife can educate well and that she is being nourished well and that your kids are nourished well so that they can grow and read good things in a timely way. I mean, I'm telling this from experience. Like my oldest is almost 15 now, and I'm feeling like I wish I had a couple more years because I was slow to come up to hit this truth. Yeah. You know, and I could be giving him a few more things, but we're still working on the spelling. We're still working on the mechanics, you know, that if I were more on top of it, and I wasn't homeschooled, so I didn't know, but like, I think we look at the ideal of like a poverty vowed person and we want to apply it to us because we want to be so holy, but it's not our state in life. And we have to have that sufficiency of material goods to produce the virtue in the children and in ourselves. We can't give them what we don't have. Yeah. So I have to be a virtuous person if I'm going to teach them to have self-denial, you know, things like that. And we have to be like super on the same team and I have to be in your corner and backing you and showing respect and affection to you if I want the kids to have that, and it's just a whole, I don't know. I'm reacting to a lot of things.
Yeah.
But...
Well, the higher never negates the lower, like Dr. Malash says.
Yeah.
And the supernatural virtues are not going to ask of you that you be, that you sin against modesty by being filthy. Yeah. Or something, that's, or by lacking decorum. And, by not having these virtues that we write off as, well, they're not quite spiritual, they're not as elevated, they're not as important. It's like, no, actually, to get to heaven, we have to be adorned with all the virtues. Yeah.
Well, and we have to know, and it's prudence. This is the virtue of prudence. We have to know which virtues to pick out at the right time. So, like you mentioned, modesty. A lot of traditional people wear dresses. Okay, fine. I wear dresses most of the time. But if I have to go garden, I'm probably going to wear overalls, and I'm going to be okay with that. And most people are going to be, my children are going to be okay with that, but I'm not going to go do that in front of a bunch of other people either. Like, there's like this balance, and, whereas some people take things too far in excess, and they're not using the right reason.
Or prudence, I guess.
Yeah.
That's the virtue of prudence.
Yeah. Because I like your definition of happiness, and actually it reminds me of the idea that happiness for Thomas is not an emotion. It is a state or an activity of living a human life well, by which we attain what is truly good for us. And we have that all backwards in our, like, the pursuit of happiness, right? It's what we built our government on. It does require virtue. Yeah. And that living well means we have to have a good amount of healthy food, a good amount of right raiment, and and
because it's very easy to find what a sufficiency of bodily goods are. It's literally food, clothing, shelter, transportation. Right. That's it.
We're not talking about
so you just need a sufficiency of those things. Yeah. It really reduces your list of things to acquire. Exactly. It's very simple. Yeah. If you've got those things, then you have a sufficiency of bodily goods and the context for the exercise of all the virtues.
Right.
Yeah. And you can get to Mass.
Yeah. Which is what we should do right now.
It's paramount. Yeah.
It's like, Tevye, if I were a rich man, he actually is pretty ordered because if the climax of that song is like, I just want to sit and read the scriptures, read the holy books. And that's what being wealthy should afford you. Right. But we do live in a society, and we haven't gotten to the fourth.
Yes.
And so we'll save it maybe. Yeah. The fourth end of manual labor. But we live in a society where manual labor has totally gone by the wayside. And so we have none of those things. We don't eat good food.
Idleness is prosperity.
Yep. Yeah. And
concupiscible indulgence is also defined as prosperity.
Right. We don't have any of those things. Yeah. And so when we have the opulence, we don't go and read the holy books. Yeah. We waste our time. Which, it's actually really hard for a rich man to enter heaven. So that's why it's actually good that we have this manual labor to anchor us.
Yeah. Well, there you go. I think that's actually the whole principle that our Lord already laid it out. Right. The benefits of manual labor.
Yeah. Right. That's why it's hard for him.
Yeah. He can make it through the eye of the needle, but it's harder.
Yeah. Well, and then the fourth end, I won't give it away, but it is a spiritual good. Yeah. Of manual labor. And that we have seen also totally go by the wayside in our society. Yeah. So maybe when we pick it up, we'll start there.
Yeah. I would like to have the excuse to look more at the virtue of poverty too. So
yes, more in depth
this week to try to look at it before our next podcast.
Yeah. Well, we will have a baby
in the fourth end of manual labor.
we're going to be very poor on time and
Yes.
sleep and some of the bodily necessities. Thank you so much for listening. We've thrown so much out. I'm sorry we haven't been more, systematic with this. Thomas is much more systematic than we have been. But thank you again, Meatsmiths, for listening to our take on all things meat making, householding, and culture keeping. We hope it's helped you in growing your home around the harvest.